Hello everyone and welcome to TC 2017 in Las Vegas. We are very excited to talk to you today about a very interesting and important question on how to deploy and run Tableau as an IT service. But let's start with a quick introduction. So this smart guy next to me, his name is Oliver Rappold. He's working as a solutions consultant in Germany, and he's my colleague since about 2.5 years now. So when Oliver is not doing Tableau, he's usually doing kite surfing and sailing, yeah. And what you might not know about him is, a funny fact about Oliver is that he usually likes to wear Nike shoes when he's in customer appointments at Adidas.
It wasn't really on purpose, but maybe we can talk about it later. But okay, well, Sebastian, before you tell any fun facts about me, I want to tell a fun fact about Sebastian as well. So he said we met 2.5 years ago. So I remember the first customer meeting we went together, and he said he's going to pick me up with his BMW he's really crazy about. So I got in his car, we drove out of the city, and he got really excited about this engagement we had with the customer. And we were talking, and suddenly, flash, boom. Yeah? So speed camera, it got us right on the ticket. It was a really nice picture. It was insanely expensive. And yeah, so that was my first impression of Sebastian, really. The first moment when I saw him on the car, I was like, okay, he apparently likes to speed in the car, right? And I mean, in Germany, on the Autobahn, you can basically do that quite well. But besides that, I need to tell you, Sebastian is really a professional, right? So he joined Tableau a little bit before me, 3 years ago. He was the only ProServe consultant in Germany back then, and he had built up a really stellar reputation with our customers. So we hope that in today's session we can give you some really good insights on the overall topic. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Oliver. So you might have recognized when you read through the title of our session, there are 2 words in the session title that might not really fit together. So we talk on one hand about Tableau, and on the other hand about IT service. And your first reaction might be like this little baby here, or, Oliver, like this strange guy on the video.
Yeah, 1 second.
Te llamo para que vaya a recoger la paellera. Y me acuesto en allá para abrir el restaurante que era el arroz. Y me llama el cocinero. Risita, ¿qué? Ve por la paellera. Venga, que las 2 de la tarde ya están aquí. Miren, bañador, en las chanclas. Todo despeinado porque no me dio tiempo nada ponerme las chanclas y el bañador. Voy a la playa, había subido la marea. ¿Y tú?
So, nevertheless, in order to achieve exactly this objective, to provide a self-service analytics platform with a secured and governed environment that is easy to deploy and manage and scale, it is really important to bring both aspects together, IT and Tableau. So as it was shown in the video, I think the video was really focusing on showing how easy it is to develop a dashboard inside Tableau Desktop. In the same way, we as Tableau are really focusing on to making it as easy as possible for you as Tableau Server admins to install, configure, maintain, and even monitor your system. Let's have a quick look on the agenda, what we would like to discuss today. So we will start answering the question about what is Tableau's recommended approach to run a Tableau project, especially considering a few key aspects. As part of this discussion, we will also look at a very important piece of internal enablement. The second section will primarily focus on really cool IT topics, like how to run, monitor, and automate your Tableau server infrastructure, and best practices on how to introduce governance rules and set up a proper data strategy. We will finish with a demo about what's coming soon, followed by some time for questions and answers. But let me start with a short question. What is the reason why you are here at Tableau conference? Or what is the reason why you want to introduce a self-service analytic culture in your organization? I think the simple answer for that question is that you want to leave behind the old BI approach, where business users just act as recipients of predefined, pre-developed reports. And you want to empower business users to ask the question to the data directly. In summary, you want to give the data in the hand of the business. And from our experience with many customers, we know that the decision to use our products is just the first step in this direction, yeah? However, we know that there are different key aspects and different key areas to consider to drive this entire change management process in your organization. We need to consider, for example, the platform. That's obvious, yeah? Like Tableau Server and databases. We also need to set up processes, yeah? Because even Tableau will never work without a proper governance strategy. And finally, the people are in the focus of each Tableau project. If we dive a bit more into the details of these areas, we see that there are typical areas where IT is typically very strong in. Yeah? If we, for example, think about the infrastructure, we are all aware we need to set up the Tableau Server environment. We need to install, configure the environment. We need to set up a proper permission rules and the object structure on the Tableau Server. And of course, in the same way, we need to allow the users to access the data. Yeah? They need to get access to the right data that is reliable. So that means we also need to take care about performance, about data quality. I already mentioned it's also important to talk about governance, yeah? About license procurement, about ongoing license management or ongoing content workflows. And very important also the security aspect, yeah? Who gets access to Tableau Server application? Who gets access to which content? Who can see which data within the same data source? However, it's not just about keeping the lights on. IT needs to support, enable, and be involved in more or lesser extent on all of these slices of the wheel we saw earlier. We need to talk, for example, about the strategy. I started with this already earlier. So why did you make the decision for a data-driven organization to move into this direction? Yeah? So what are the aspects you want to make better in the future? What are your key measures where you define that you were successful after 6 or 12 months? In the same way, we need to talk about education and enablement, yeah? So if you want to give the data into the hand of the users, it's not just throwing them a tool. It's very important to enable them, yeah, and to give them a training plan. In the same way, providing them with the right resources, yeah, about best practices, about, yeah, template things. And also, a very important point, the community aspect. At Tableau, we live community. And we strongly believe that working in a community is a key success factor for each Tableau deployment. When we are talking about community, there are different aspects. On the one hand, we are talking about a platform, a community platform, like a wiki, for example, where people find useful content. We talk about, yeah, developing an enablement plan. So new users, how can they get started with Tableau? How can they get trained? How can we upskill them? We can talk about typical champions, yeah? Champions who are driving Tableau in a department, yeah? Who are taking the lead on that of this initiative. But in the same way, we are talking about different activities, like office hours that can help the users in their daily work if they have questions, yeah? Or lunch and learn sessions that can be scheduled every week, or even Tableau user groups, yeah? Where people work together, they collaborate, and they can learn from each other to do their day-to-day job even better. The question is now, how can we all make this happen, yeah? And typically, the introduction of a COE will help to make this happen. The Center of Expertise will organize the community activities and will also build and maintain a community portal where people find useful content and discussion forums, like shown in this screenshot from a customer here. Yeah? People will find, for example, training on upcoming training options. They can find resources they can work with, best practices. But the COE can also help to inform users in this portal on how to start with Tableau at all, yeah? In your organization, yeah? How to get a license, who are the contact persons in order to get started? Or if they have questions during their daily work, yeah? Who can they connect? Or if they have an error on the Tableau server, who is their contact person? Again, the community is a key aspect to run Tableau as an IT service in the organization successfully. Now, for the real cool IT topics, I give the ball to Oliver.
Yep, thank you so much. So this next part about powered by IT is really about those of you who are more interested in server stats than maybe in anything else, right? The first section we're going to talk about is Tableau deployment. So speaking about Tableau deployment, actually the most common phrase and question I get from my customers is Tableau enterprise ready? So my question is, what does enterprise ready really mean, right? Is it maybe something like this? Yeah. So I'm more of the Star Trek guy, so yeah, maybe not. Flexible deployment in this case, as we heard this morning in our keynote, is really essential. Why is it essential? Because I cannot go to my customer and saying, well, dear customer, I do not like your old school relational data source. You maybe invested like a few $100K, but can we maybe change that to a more modern thing? I cannot just do that. So the analytical solution should not dictate the technology stack behind. It should basically integrate and leverage the existing investments, okay? It should fit into the existing technology, and I mean, for example, things like how does security integration work like? How does mobile access work for people that have company-issued devices? And what Tableau wants to do is it wants to offer all options in order to adapt to changing needs an organization go through, because it's a process, right? So that is really important to keep in mind. So what are the key characteristics we need to keep in mind? If we talk about infrastructure, Tableau Server needs to be performant, of course, scalable, available, up-to-date, and stable. So what does this all mean? If we talk about performance, right, what is the point of having a reporting tool that is slow? There is no point, right? Because the users will just use it in order to export the data and then maybe work in Excel. So performance is really the key of driving a really good user experience and to drive adoption. So most of my customers leverage virtualized environments and do not respect the vendor best practices, for example, in order to allocate dedicated resources. I'm pretty sure most of you in the room are also run on virtualized environments, and if you're having performance issues, it might be for the biggest reason as you've not allocated dedicated resources. And please ask your pre-sales focal point at Tableau about a checklist, because we do have internal checklists that tell you exactly on what kind of settings you should enable in order to have a really good performance. Also, what I often see with customers is that they are running below the minimum system requirements. Just because you can install Tableau Server on a two-core machine, please just don't do it, okay? It will not work as expected, especially if you have a higher concurrency of users, okay? And lastly, and that is really important, Tableau Server can be tweaked extensively, right? So there are so many configuration things you can tweak. Even on a single 8-core machine, you can do so much stuff. But of course, you need to know what are the specific metrics and parameters that you can tweak. And basically, what you need for that is better insight on your overall server. But it will come to a point where the single 8-core server hits a specific limit, and you need to scale, right? So how does Tableau Server scale? So first of all, Tableau Server can scale up. That means you can put more hardware in the existing server. That allows you to reach a higher concurrency of users, and you can also add more processes of the existing Tableau server to balance out the workload a little bit more. This is scaling up. And then the second option we do have is scaling out. So instead of putting more hardware in one machine, we can put up several nodes, and we can balance the workload even better. A perfect example for that is leveraging the backgrounder process. If you have many extracts, then it makes sense to have a dedicated backgrounder machine so it does not interfere with the user activity on the server. So that is scaling out. We at Tableau, we recommend to scale out first and then scale up. So why is that? Because scaling out gives you more control of balancing of the workload. That is the first thing. And the second point is you also achieve high availability. So if one process goes down, there is another process that can then take over. Plus, you can add specialized nodes, as I mentioned, with the backgrounder process. So that's about scaling up, scaling out. And the question is, what does happen when Tableau Server just crashes? So what's next? How does high availability really looks like? So high availability is deeply embedded into the core Tableau Server installation. And depending on your license model, you are free to add more nodes in order to balance off those specific processes to get the system more stable. One annotation I want to make to the top primary Tableau Server node you see on top. This is basically a service that is just running the core components, and this does not need to be licensed. It can be used as a maybe gateway where all the requests come in, and then you have the individual licensed worker nodes that are doing the heavy lifting. Right? But what is if high availability maybe fails and your system really goes down? Then we go into a plan or into a mode where disaster recovery becomes really critical. Okay? Disaster recovery is designed if your main server fails, that you need to have an instant way of putting up a separate machine in order to balance out the outage of your server. And according to our EULA, you have 2 non-productive systems and 1 production system. So our recommendation is that you can use one of those non-production systems and set up a cold state backup, which is basically a copy of your production system, but it's not powered on. And as soon as your production system fails, you can just power this on with the latest backup, and you have another Tableau server running in your environment, so you have time to figure out what the actual issue with your production system is. So disaster recovery is also a key part, because Tableau, and this is something we see, is getting more and more business and mission critical. By the way, also upgrading is nice, because upgrades as of now require a full installation of the Tableau server. You can also use one of your non-productive instances that you then switch to a production kind of mode in order to do the upgrade on the production machine itself. So it's just easier for you with lower downtime to balance out the upgrade times. Speaking of upgrades, Tableau announced to release quarterly updates. That's pretty cool for you. Maybe not for you, maybe for the business users, because they get new features all the time, right? So maybe just 2 weeks ago, we launched 10.4, and today in the keynote, it was announced that the beta for 10.5 was already released. So of course, it can really be a challenge for the IT to satisfy the BI, the needs of the business user, right? Because to always have the greatest and latest Tableau version. So what I can say from an experience is that it's important that the IT admin works together closely with the business to set up a cadence that the expectation is pretty clear and set. Till our last release, it was quite a challenge to keep Tableau Server and Tableau Desktop in sync, okay? But as you can see down on the left side with the latest release, that is not a problem anymore. Yay, because now you can basically publish from a newer Tableau Desktop version to an older Tableau Server. That is pretty cool. And another good news in Q4, for those of you who run Tableau Desktop in virtual desktop environments that are non-persistent, we will add support for that as well. That is especially helpful for licensing implications that is bringing, that non-persistent environments are bringing today. So now I showed you really a couple of slides about the infrastructure, what kind of options you have, how you can deploy the server. The question really is there one configuration to rule them all? And of course, there is not, right? So the point or the question you need to really ask yourself is, how can you continuously ensure to have the best available configuration of your Tableau server? That is really the point. At each specific point in time of your business, you need to ensure that you have the best output, the best configuration set for your Tableau server. And how do you do that? First of all, Tableau delivers or provides you a lot of data. So the Tableau repository, you gather the data, you monitor it, and you analyze it. And that will help you to tune the Tableau server for the best performance, right? And the part is that you really proactively need to adapt those changes according to the usage of the platform. You might start off with people just viewing reports because they're, so to speak, getting warm with Tableau. But then when their skill level rises, they might do like a lot of ad hoc analysis. So it completely changes the workload on the Tableau server. And this is something you really need to keep in mind. Next, I want to show you an example, our Alpo deployment. So now you might be wondering yourself, what is Alpo? What should that say, right? And a US mate of me, a US colleague actually told me that Alpo is a dog food, and that was good information for me, right? Because we named our internal Tableau server to Alpo, and that is because we say we eat our own dog food, so to speak, right? We use Tableau server internally quite heavy, and I want to show you an example of this. What you can see here is a diagram of our Tableau server Alpo distribution, and you can see that we have a distributed environment, of course. Yes, you're allowed to take screenshots. You can see how many workbooks do we have right now? 6,400. That is quite a huge number. And the thing I want to show and emphasize here is we have a distributed environment, of course, and we have local instances that are running, for example, in EMEA for the Europe team and in Singapore. And then the content is being automatically synced, so it keeps up to date. So that is one point I want to say. And then also we do have, of course, a dev environment because dev likes to break things. So that's why they have their own environment where they can play around. Okay. The local data sources are mainly for the reason because we have sensitive data in the respective units. So yeah, we have those data silos, so to speak. And coming from this perspective or from this diagram now to the actual Tableau server processes. Right? So on the right side, you see some specs. And if you look at the processes, it is obvious that we did not start with this configuration at the beginning, right? So again, it is a process that we involved in order to continuously adapt to our internal needs. So Tableau hired a lot of new employees, and the usage changed, so we increased overall our configuration till we come to a point that it looks like today. There is a full failover scenario possible here. So we have active disaster recovery in this case. And please do not freak out if you take a look at the number of backgrounders there, especially for the workers 3 to 5, right? So a lot of backgrounder processes happening around there. I will tell you a little bit later on why that is the case. Of course, managing a system like this requires you to have a really good visibility. And that brings us to the next topic about monitoring and maintenance. So how does that work? You better have a really good concept in place because platform management is really key. You need to have a visibility into performance, into the consumption of the content and also data sources, and you need to know about the hardware utilization, right? This is really critical in order to proactively manage a platform. And to give you a more specific example, I once went to a customer and he was telling me, oh wow, unser traditional BI systems currently handling 20,000 reports a day. I'm like, wow, that is quite a lot. But it actually turned out that only a few people actually viewed those reports, right? Because they were just distributed and bursted to the recipients, but nobody actually viewed them, right? So you really need to challenge the status quo from those traditional standard reporting cases. And you as an administrator, you need to feel confident by overseeing all the activities that happen around at the Tableau server, right? Because we see more and more analytical platforms that become mission critical. And in order to get a better visibility on the server itself, we of course have specific tools. By the way, I added a link resource down there. Paul Benoop is actually a server administrator from UBS, and he's running a really successful blog. Maybe some of you know him. So he posts about things that really correlate with today's topic on how to establish a Tableau Server service in an organization. It is really, really a good resource, and you will get the slides after our presentation. So what are the tools? Of course, we do have the Tableau repository that you can leverage in order to build custom admin views and in order to leverage the existing admin views. Then we have Tab Admin, where we can do some automation tasks like cleanups, automated backups. I think this is pretty basic. And most of those tools, I will not go into detail of any of those because I could basically tell or talk maybe 1 or 2 hours about each of those tools, and we have a related session for this. I just want to show you the breadth of tools that are all available on GitHub, basically, for you ready to use. Tabmon is for hardware monitoring, TabJolt is for load testing, and LogShark, maybe worth to mention, just released the version 2. The version 2 has been a complete redesign of the existing workbooks, and LogShark version 2 will allow you to analyze more processes than in the previous version. Talking about custom admin views, I do have one customer example from Carlson's. They basically track their Tableau adoption rate. What I do with my customers from time to time is I offer them to do a so-called pre-sale server health check. So what I do there is I dig into the content and see what are the top workbooks, how is the usage, what is the adoption rate, and things like that. So that is basically a fixed term. You can feel free to ask the pre-sales resource at Tableau if he's willing to do a Tableau server health check for your instance as well. I can highly recommend that. The second one is actually now looking at the Tableau top contents. And as you can see, of course, you have some top workbooks. And a little fun fact about that, last week I was at a customer with 800 Tableau users. And it turned out that 90% of the overall Tableau server traffic came from the top 4 workbooks. And the customer had 350 workbooks on the server and over 240 data sources. So my question is, why? Why when 90% is really driven by 10 workbooks? But first of all, you need to have this kind of insight in order to drive decisions out of this. Coming back to our Alpha reports, this is just a reminder, take a look at worker 3 to worker 5, how many backgrounders they're working, right? And on primary and worker 1 and worker 2, there is no backgrounder process scheduled. And this is now about scaling out in this case in order to balance those processes. And if you take a look at this chart now, it is showing you CPU, processing time. And the first 3 nodes are actually those nodes that are handling the interactive requests by the users, and the last 3 ones are the backgrounders. So it is really important to understand that the user experience would be highly negatively affected by any extra refreshes happening on the first 3 nodes. And that is a really good example from our internal Alpo system. This one as well, I like it because the stats are pretty impressive. First of all, this nice fellow has been designed for printout, so that you can print it, as you can see. No, I'm kidding. I have no idea why it's actually designed that way and not like scaled to another resolution, but whatsoever. So coming back to the stats, 45,000 views a day, I think is a pretty good number. So that's our internal usage. And 1.3 million view accesses per month is also quite interesting. So it seems like we really eat our own dog food. Talking about numbers like this, you absolutely do not want to manually handle that, right? So you need to have some automation in place that helps you to make the Tableau server run really smoothly. So that brings us to the automation part. Why is that important? Has any one of you tried to add 300 local users manually using the Tableau server GUI? I highly doubt it. I hope it for you. So basically, that's the answer, right? Automating things that make your life easier can be applied across the overall Tableau server platform. And I will show some examples throughout this section now. Again, the same, similar to the monitoring part, we have a rich tool set of automation, which can be found on Tabmon. And it begins with a batch scripts, for example, tab admin or tab command, where you can do some basic housekeeping stuff like moving contents right? This would be one use case. But it also goes to fully automated installations of Tableau Server and Tableau Desktop. And we actually do have some customers who are able to completely silent deploy their Tableau Server clusters, including configuring SAML, for example, doing the activation and registration. All those are parts that make your life easier by allowing to have a full automation within this stack. I will have an example afterwards. REST API, I think, is really important to automate all kind of activities like adding users, changing permissions, moving content. And we do have a really good Tableau Server client library that is written in Python that leverage REST API calls quite easily. And the last part, you can see that there are hyperlinks in the presentation as well. We have updated this one, the Tableau Server client library as well. So it has been brought to a whole new level. And instead of writing really complex and not really comfortable REST API calls, you can just leverage this pre-built library in order to automate things on the Tableau server. For example, and this is one of the screenshots, if you recall the CSV file at the beginning, you don't need to read that in detail. It's just about the length of the code. That is an example on how you can automatically import users from a CSV file using this client-server library. Okay? And in the background, REST API calls are doing the work. So that is one example. Another one, really also a top request I see quite often. How do I can auto-generate a PDF and send it via email? I hope we all agree that we actually never want to do that. Okay? Don't create a PDF and send it via email. But if you need to, well, here's how. Okay? So there is mostly a way that you can do things in Tableau, but just because you can, please don't. Okay? This is a script example on how you can silent deploy Tableau Server. Okay, so you define, okay, where is your installer? How should the licensing activation work? Where do you want to install it? And the more interesting part is the next slide about the configuration. So the configuration has options in order to basically specify any parameter that comes with a Tableau server. So for example, setting up SSL, setting up SAML, authentication things. And it, again, is helpful if you need to upgrade Tableau servers or if you're deployed in virtualized environments. So it is all well documented in our Tableau documentation. And now comes a last example, and a pretty outstanding one, I guess, and I'm really happy that I can share that with you today. The first screen we see here is just a landing page, nothing fancy, right? So it's outlining the importance and the value of data analytics for this specific company. So if a user goes to this specific site, what he can do is he can log in or he can create an account. Okay? So they are working with Microsoft Azure Active Directory, and they can sign up there. The interesting part comes next. So once they are logged in, they're getting into a store interface-like website where they can now actually order Tableau Desktop or Tableau Server. So they just press a button, and then something in the background happens, okay? And please notice the Data Service tab on the bottom right side. So the platform is not only built for providing the Tableau stock, but also the data service perspective. So that's quite interesting. And once the user is clicking on the order button of the Analytics desktop, he will receive automated emails like, okay, thank you for ordering this. And as soon as the Tableau desktop has been provisioned, he will receive another email, okay, your instance is ready. Please click on this link to see instructions, how it works, and then you can get started. And it is really important, as Sebastian mentioned, about the enablement process to really give good instructions to the users that they know what to do. So then the SSL certificate is being installed. That is all fine. And as soon as the environment gets provisioned, the user just needs to hit the little start button for the Tableau desktop, and he can then leverage the remote desktop application from Microsoft to connect to his virtual machine. And it has just been created in the background. So I think this is a perfect example of leveraging our APIs and to basically deploy Tableau fully automated, in a fully automated manner. And it is a wonderful experience for the business user, I would say. So with that, basically, I want to conclude the first part of the IT session. And I want to hand over to Sebastian to continue with an indispensable topic that we heard today from our very own CEO, Adam Silipsky, in our keynote. Sebastian?
Thank you very much, Oliver. Let's continue talking about governance, also a cool IT topic. The question is, why do we need governance rules at all? And the answer for that is, we want to avoid chaos. Yeah. Self-service does not automatically mean chaos. And typically, or very typical areas to focus on in the governance area are content workflows, ongoing content management, or the question how we can secure the application or we can audit the application, the topic of license management and license tracking. And in the same way, the very important topic that we heard this morning at in our keynote from Honeywell, how important it is to set up a proper governance, data governance process. A very common question I get asked from customers, typically at the beginning of each Tableau project, is how should I separate non-productive content from productive content in a self-service environment? Tableau's easy answer on that is to simply set up 2 projects for each department in an organization. The Sandbox project allows all users to share the results of their analysis by publishing content into this project. Therefore, all users which create content either in Tableau Desktop or on Tableau Server in the web edit can easily have only the read and write permission on the Sandbox project. The more governed area is the standard or production project. And most users have then only read permission on that project. And only few users have a permission to move or publish content into the standard project. But please mind, we are all human beings, and we are mostly lazy. There's one risk with that, that content remains in Sandbox. That's why we highly recommend to actively promote content from Sandbox into the standard project. And again, that's also an experience we heard in our keynote this morning from Honeywell, because we want to increase the number and the amount of content that is quality tested, that we can trust, that is proved. And just to prove, Oliver already talked about our Alpo environment at Tableau. We are doing the same at Tableau in the Alpo environment. We have here an example from our professional services department, where all of us have the option to publish ad hoc analysis and outputs and share it in our Sandbox project. And the more governed area is, in this case, our professional services standard or production project. So the question is now, or that's another very common question I get asked from customers. So there is a risk with this Sandbox, So people are publishing new content all the day and all the time, and the amount increases and increases. And again, we are all human beings, so do we really care about content that we saved in this Sandbox project 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago? I'm not. And that's why a recommended way of setting up ongoing content management is to set up a regular cleanup process, A cleanup process that checks the content that lives in the Sandbox area, For example, I have customers who are setting up a limit of 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, and the automation checks the content inside and leverages the data that's stored in the repository, where we know when the content was published. And with the REST API, it either moves the content into a hidden Sandbox recycle bin, for example, or it directly deletes it, And if you want to be a friend of your user, you might send him an email that the content will be deleted or moved in 2 to 3 days. Another aspect of governance is security and auditing. And in the area of security, we usually differentiate these 3 different areas. First of all, we want to define who can authenticate to Tableau Server. You know that for those of you who work with Tableau Server, we have the first question is the user management method. Yeah? So we are able to either leverage an existing Active Directory user and can import him to Tableau Server, or in some cases, it's only possible to define local authentication or local user management on Tableau Server. But that's only the first part, because when we have the users inside Tableau Server, the question is then how can we authenticate them? Yeah? And there are also some basic options. If we just have local authentication or Active Directory configured, authentication will be performed either directly on Tableau Server or in collaboration or in combination with Active Directory. Or we can also include our Tableau Server application in an existing single sign-on environment. Yeah? We can, for example, leverage Kerberos single sign-on authentication, or we can leverage SAML or OpenID, IDPs, in order to authenticate users on Tableau Server directly. Once the user has been authenticated to Tableau Server, we are talking about authorization, yeah? Because not everybody should see everything. That's why we need to define user roles and group or user permissions on the Tableau Server itself in order to define who is seeing what, yeah? And who has the permission to do what, from view to interact until publish. And the last and the third important step is then the data security. Yeah? We are either possible to leverage data security directly in the database by, for example, configuring a single sign-on to a data source, or we are using authentication during the execution process, or we are also able to define user filters or group-based filters in the metadata model of our Tableau Server. When it comes to the question of auditing, then Logshark is a good decision. Oliver talked about already the option of Logshark. We have now version 2 already also available, in order to get more insights about the log files and get really important information out of that. Another very useful source of information that you can use for auditing is our repository database. Yeah? And for those of you who just started with Tableau Server, you can use the built-in admin views. But of course, if you have a lot of time, and it's really recommended to dig deeper in that, to build your own custom admin views, to get much more insight and to use Tableau to analyze your data of your Tableau Server application. Not sure who of you used this already, because that's, thank you. License management. That's nothing that is enabled per default, but you can easily configure it during your Tableau desktop installation processes. And once configured, you have a great overview here to see not only the users that are using Tableau Server, you get an overview who is using Tableau desktop. How many Tableau desktop licenses do you have in use? When do the licenses expire? When was this license last used? So that means that's a great way of, or a great supporting tool in order to handle your license management also on Tableau desktop. Another key aspect of a Tableau project is data governance. And we heard a great example in the keynote this morning from Honeywell, explaining why it is important to set up a proper data strategy. We want to give the data into the hand of business users, But think about a user who has never touched a database or who does never heard about joins or unions. Wouldn't it be great if we can provide them with a predefined semantic layer where all the work has already been done? And yes, we have such an environment on Tableau Server. We have our data server. Data server allows us that not each user needs to connect directly to its data source. Data server allows us that a role that we call the data steward, for example, and we will talk about this later in the section, that he is doing all this pre-work already. He's first connecting to the data source itself, so he knows the credentials, and he can define the area of the data that we want to analyze. Yeah, so he can set up the right data the right joins between the tables, and then he can enhance this data model already. He can add business logic, for example. Yeah, that means he can add calculations, he can add dimensions, he can group items in folders, and he can enhance this data model already from a business logic perspective. We can also use data security. Yeah, I said already, there are two options available. We can either leverage data security directly in the database, or in this case, we can set up a data security within our metadata model on Tableau. And a great way of doing that, or a great benefit of this, is also that we can use it to audit things. Yeah? Because it's hard to audit if a user connects directly to a database. We don't see it in Tableau directly. But if we set up such a centralized data model on Tableau Server, we can see who has connected to this data source. How many times has users connect to this data source, or how many workbooks are connected to this data source. How does it work? I already started explaining that. So we have a Tableau desktop user that does all the pre-work, from the connection until the adding the business logic, adding data security logic. And then rather than publishing the entire workbook on Tableau Server, he is just publishing the data source model on Tableau Server. And all the other users, either users in Tableau Desktop or Webedit users, or just end users on Tableau Server, can directly benefit from this data source model. And the great way is it is documented. Yeah? So the data source admin or the data steward, he can document what is included in this data source. It's clearly defined what join types have been used, which tables are used together. And he has the information about who is using that on Tableau Server directly. So what is now, why should we yet use published data sources at all, to summarize? A great thing is the reusability. Yeah? When we think, for example, about data sources that are using extracts, rather than having 10 workbooks with an embedded extract, where we need to refresh this extract in 10 workbooks, we can centralize it. Yeah? So we have one single version of truth that we can develop, maintain, and that can be used and split around by many workbooks. So we can provide access control, by either adding data security, or we provide this data source only in a project where a set of users have permissions for. We can make it easier for users, like I said at the beginning, users that are not so experienced in databases, so they can focus on their analytics work rather than struggling with building a data source model directly. And again, we can extract the data. We only need to extract the data only once and don't need to do it in many different workbooks directly. What is now a recommended setup, or what is a approved setup on how we split the workbooks and the data sources in the different state? And I already talked about the split of the sandbox project for workbooks and the splitting it from production workbooks. So what I usually recommend customers to do is, in addition to this sandbox and production or standard project that is used for workbooks, to also add a data source project. The data source project can then be used in order to publish these governed data source model inside. So that means these data sources that when living in this data source project can be consumed either by workbooks living in the standard project, and it can also be consumed by users that want to perform ad hoc analysis. And we just talked about a lot of, I used the wording of end users and you have content creators, and when I also talked about data steward. So how does this fit together? So the process I just explained about providing these published data sources is a very typical process that is owned by the data steward. Yeah? So the data steward, for me personally, is the most important part in such a self-service environment. Because the data steward is the interface between the business and the IT. The data steward needs to talk to business and ask what is the data you require for your daily work. And then he also needs to talk directly to the IT in order to set up and manage and in order to provide the data sources in the best way. And this can be a direct connection, a live connection to the data source, or it can also be a data extract. So that means this data steward is responsible, to publish these predefined metadata models in this data source project. When we have our content creators, the content creators are typically Tableau desktop users, The Tableau desktop users that connect to these predefined data sources, that build dashboards, that perform analysis, and share their content in the sandbox project. And then we have our end users, our consumers, that are primarily start consuming existing content on the production environment, or if you enable the web edit on Tableau Server as well, that we're able to adjust and enhance existing dashboards that are existing on Tableau Server. Last but not least, please mind, delegate with caution. I think that's one of the challenges in the self-service environment. So if you give people more flexibility, more permissions to do things, they get more responsibility on that. So that's a very important fact to consider in this area. And just to prove that I'm not talking just about a theoretical thing, we are doing the same in our Alpo environment as well. In our Alpo environment, we also have these kind of data stewards that are connecting directly to our data sources, that are publishing these data sources and provide them to all of our employees at Tableau, for example, sales employees, that they are able to consume them directly either on Tableau Desktop or on Tableau Server as well. So congratulations, we successfully finished the hard theoretical part of this session. As there is no session without a demo, Olli, the stage is yours.
So the last part is really about what is coming soon for Tableau administrators in terms of data modeling, in terms of Tableau Server, metadata management, governance, all the features that Sebastian and I had explained to you on the earlier slides. So what I will do now is I need to change really quickly. No, that's fine. That's good. To log into the Tableau server. Is that duplicated? Yep. So basically what you see here is the new interface, how it will look like really soon. You see data sources, but they look a little bit different than in today's release. So basically it gives you much more insight and description on what the data source stores in kind of information, who is the data source owner, and how is the usage for the specific data source. So if I scroll down there, for example, you see we have a sales and marketing activity that is a live data source. You see the data source owner over here, and a little description where it connects to, how many views are connected to the specific data source, and the fields. Here, right here, you also see the certified icon. So basically, that is the point Sebastian mentioned, that the data steward can now flag a data source as a governed data source. This is actually possible as of today. Okay? So let's assume we want to do some changes to this specific data source. So what I can do is I can click on product sales, and you will see a new view. This is different. This is the new one. And on the left side, you see the fields that have been used from the data source. And if I scroll down from a field perspective, I can see that there are dimensions and measures, and some of them have not been used at all. And when I go on-site to a customer, IT and also the data steward most of the time struggles because business always says, I need everything. I need all dimensions, I need all measures, I need as much as possible as I can get. And that is a problem because it has implications on the performance, right? With this new view and kind of analysis on the metadata, it allows you to say, well, okay, I exactly see what are my key fields that have been used on the report, so why not, for example, removing the unused fields? Okay? This way, it keeps the data set small, it increases the performance. So that is one really cool change that can be done from the Tableau server directly. Before that, you need to download the data source in Tableau Desktop, you need to edit it, and you need to republish it again. You also see some user statistics, usage statistics, plus also a preview. I think that is pretty helpful. It is a small thing, seeing preview data, but doing that on a Tableau server is pretty cool because it gives you an idea, okay, how does the data look like? What are the common fields? You, of course, see what kind of workbooks are connected, what are the users that are using it. And now comes a pretty cool part. We see a tab called Customizations. If I click on Customizations, those are basically user-defined calculations that have been added on top of the governed data source that has been published. So what I can see is, for example, there is this one field, sales region. It has been used in the regional sales workbook, and it has quite a lot of views. So if I click on this one, I will basically jump into the edit mode and I will get an understanding what is this calculation doing. And in our case, those are predefined sales regions that this specific user has created. So what we can do from here, the user itself, like the data steward or the business user, he can create the field and then he can push it to the data source owner and tell him, okay, hey, please add this field as a recommended data field for the governed data source. So that has been added. As soon as I switch back to the role of my data steward perspective, I can see, okay, there is a little annotation of this calculation, and I can just drag and drop this field to the left side, and it will automatically be added to the governed data source. And this is pretty cool because it allows you a complete new way on how you can work with governed data sources. You do not always need Tableau Desktop for doing things like that. Okay, so you have much more control about that. This is something I like a lot. If I go back to my data sources, what you also see is a little tab indicating new data source. So that is only something I can speculate about, but maybe as a next step, why not just adding new data sources from the Tableau server directly, right? We will have the Tableau Dev on Stage session coming up this afternoon. I highly recommend you to go in there because I'm pretty sure that we will see some more cool features about the data governance topic here. Going back to the presentation real quickly, this one. As I said, governance and metadata management will come to the Tableau server. We will see things like easy modeling capabilities on the server, agile data models that the data steward can take action directly within the Tableau server. That is pretty cool. A capability that is already available is so-called data source recommendations based on machine learning. It will help the user to say, hey, you are trying to connect to a SQL server, you pulled in a sales table, do you also want to add other tables based on recommendations what other users have already been done on the server? That is pretty good. We bring that for data source recommendations, but also for visualizations at a later point of time. Those are basically the really quick announcements and upcoming features that will come really soon. As I said, more on the dev session. And before we go to the question and answer part, I would like to ask you to provide feedback, because feedback is obviously really important for us to improve the session. Go to the app, give a really quick feedback. We would appreciate that. And then I do have one more announcement to make, because we have, I think, the biggest Tableau customer and Tableau server admin in the room today from Apple. And they are running a Tableau user group tomorrow afternoon. You can find it in the app, which is a user group for Tableau admins. Okay, so keep that in your agenda if you're interested to join that. And with that, I would go to the question and answer part. And who wants to start? Thank you.
Yes. Hey.
Yes.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, who wants to start? Andrew, I think you, yeah?
What version is the new features on the server?
That has not been specified yet, because as I talked about the quarterly release cycle, we will push a feature as soon as it's ready. We are not committing to a specific release date.
One more question on that new feature. I don't know if it's been hashed out yet or not, but
Yes?
Is there versioning with that? Like, if you do that, are you able to go back?
Yes, because versioning is in place right now, so basically you can assume that whenever you do changes, you do have the versioning to roll back. Yes. Yep, Andrew?
I'm starting to use our own sample workbooks or pushing out our own custom sample packages, so you can get some templates. We would love to leverage the Discover pane on the right at the start to kind of customize that, put our own links, that sort of thing. Doesn't seem to be kind of anywhere on the roadmap. One because of the interest in that feature.
Are you aware of something like that?
I'm not sure about that. No,
No,
sorry.
me neither.
The Discover pane's there, it's kind of useful, but we'd love
Yeah.
to put our own content in there, our own kind of COS like that sort of thing.
Right, right. So maybe that would be a good starting point for tomorrow's user group then, yeah? To talk about capabilities like that.
So, your question.
So in one of your earlier slides, you showed multiple deployments across the globe, and you are syncing the data sources across that, and the workbooks, or?
No.
And go ahead.
It was one of your slides about Alpo, so we are directly located. So that means we are not syncing the workbooks itself, yeah? So we have the Tableau Server installation that is directly related to the data sources as well, yeah? So these are separate Tableau Server installations then.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, in one of your slides regarding data source, you have the live connection. Were you using row-level security?
Just to repeat the question, so you said we do have a live connection on one of those slides. What about the row-level security then?
Are you using row-level security on data source?
On our Alpo system, yes, we do. Yes, absolutely. So we leverage row-level security. So whoever logs in has a different kind of permissioning set on that.
And for authentication, what do you use?
Active Directory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a follow-up question, one he asked. Does Tableau have an inbuilt feature capability that we can leverage for row level and column level security? Or is it something we have to write a code or something?
I think there are two options, as I mentioned. You can leverage row-level security directly from a database, yeah? Or you can work with either user filters or group-based filters within the calculation in the metadata model, yeah? I know that's sometimes challenging, especially in very complex use cases, yeah? But I had a chat, especially when we talk about extracts, yeah? But I had a chat with the Hyper guys already as well, and I think Hyper will allow you to add much more flexibility on that as well, yeah, with regard to the row-level security.
Both live connection as well as extracts, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think we have time for two more questions. Maybe we start with you and.
You mentioned when you go into different partners and companies, you evaluate their server, right?
Yeah.
So what are the kind of the three main things you look for when you do that evaluation versus maybe wants to do that in their own office?
Yeah. So the question was for everyone in the room, when we do this pre-sale server health check, what are the top three things that we pay attention to and the top three findings, basically? So one thing I really take a closer look is on how are extract refreshes and user interactions handled, right? So for example, during peak times, do I see also extract refreshes, or are they all set up for the night? That is like a top thing in order to see that they are not collidating with each other. So that is basically number one. Thing number two is around housekeeping, right? So what I see is that many Tableau Server environments do have way too much content being deployed there. As Sebastian said, we're all lazy. We love self-service, but the problem really is to just remove content that we don't need anymore. So that is number two. And of course, it will improve the overall stability and performance of the server if you get rid of the unused stuff. And the point number three is basically, what is the ratio between live data connections and extract connections? That is really important to know. What you need to consider is, if you are highly relying on extracts, you're leveraging Tableau Server not only as your analytical front end, but also as your database, right? And of course, that has a huge implication on the server sizing as well.
So, your last question, please.
So
So if I understand the question correctly, it's around users creating similar data sources and publish them and basically duplicate either a live connection or an extra connection. I think this is something where our smart recommendations come in play. If a user starts pulling together the same joins from the same tables, Tableau will basically tell them, hey, there is a data source similar to that. Why not just using this one, right? I haven't seen an automated way of analyzing basically the structure of what users have been uploaded. I don't know, Sebastian, you?
I think the new management tool we get, what you just presented, will also help. It should help also for published data sources, but also for workbooks itself, I think. Yeah.
Good. All right, so we will stay here for a few more questions, but the official session is over.
Thank you very
so
much.